Hey, I'm Dr. Paul. Let me share with you how our Car Injury Doctors Network will actually do the selling of the attorneys for you, creating attorney referrals for you. And that's exactly what I do. It's the Car Injury Doctors Network. And I'll tell you how it started. It was actually by accident. I created referrals for myself. Again, I'm Dr. Paul. I've opened 77 offices in 20 states, speaker in 3 chiropractic colleges. I've authored 10 books now. I do CLE, continuing education for doctors and attorneys across the nation and do consulting. Never lost a case in court. As a matter of fact, that's the documentation we teach. But this is exactly how successful it can be. Our slow doctors typically will increase their business $250,000, typically anywhere from say 6 to 12 months, something like that. That's if you're slow. If you're a little more of an aggressive doctor, you can increase your business $250,000, $500,000, typically in 3 to 6 months. And this is how, I went and gave personal injury attorney presentations for 7 of my clients. And it the total number of attorneys were about 110 total in 7 presentations. And we signed up 98% of those attorneys for those referrals, creating over about $20 million in business. We did that in 1 year. Now, I did it myself in my practice for a long time, and then I did it for a few of my clients, and I thought, well, how can I leverage this and help more doctors? That's how it started. And I go, wait a minute. I can do this. I can do the educational sales just like I do, but I'll do it live stream. So I just have the doctors help organize the attorneys and help set it up, and then I do the actual selling of to the attorneys. And I found that a lot of doctors don't like, what we call selling to the attorneys. They don't like giving attorney presentations, but they obviously like the income. And so I thought, well, I can take care of that. So that's what we do. That's what the Car Injury Doctor Network does. Let me share with you specifically how that works. And some other examples is we have a doctor in California, Dr. Seamus increased his business over $1 million within 18 months, opened his 2nd PI office, getting ready to open his 3rd PI office. Dr. Kevin, Kansas, he increased his business over $250,000 a year. Dr. Joe increased his practice over $250,000. He did that within 4 to 6 months. Dr. Dave on the East Coast, he's over in, Dave's in Virginia. He increased his business over $500,000. He does $1 million a year now. Just from this personal injury. And all he does is personal injury and cash patients. That's it. So he's got a really good dollar per visit. It's just him in there. He'll collects over $1 million a year. So, and we know the case average for personal injury, on average, typically it can be $3,000, depending on the state you're in. Even if you're not in what we consider a good insurance state, it's still typically around $3,000. If you're in a good state, it can be $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 per case. So in other words, you can make 2 and 3 and 4 times as much money treating a personal injury patient versus a major medical or cash patient. So let's go into how this works. And so what I do, bottom line, is I sell the attorneys for you, and then you have to do the documentation and to treat them, and fill out the narrative report accordingly. So I have a whole checklist on how that works. But let me just share with you how this works. I'm going to talk about 3 topics. 1 is how big is the opportunity. 2 is personal injury attorney educational sales, which is unbelievably, and that's why it works so well, if you know that. And I explain why advertising does not work and why publicity does not work. Educational sales works unbelievably well. And I explain all that. And the 3rd category is actually how does it work and what does it cost? So let me walk through those 3 categories. So what kind of an opportunity is there in personal injury? Well, you can just go to your geographic area of draw, whatever that is, and it's multiply your population draw times 2%. 2% of your population is in automobile accidents every year, 2%. 87% of those people have a soft tissue injury. In other words, the majority of them have a soft tissue injury, what chiropractors help. A third of them have a disc injury. So chiropractors have way greater opportunity, and there's more potential patients. If it's a disc injury, they don't need a chiropractor as much. They've got an orthopedist or a neurosurgeon, but it's only a third of the cases. Next is nerve conditions are 16%, so there's not a whole lot of nerve. A neurologist will beat the chiropractor out from a marketing standpoint, but it's only 16%, so we don't worry about that either. Mild concussions are 10%. And again, a neurologist, neurosurgeon will easily beat out a chiropractor for a mild concussion just from basic marketing, but it doesn't matter because it's only 10%. And fractures are 2%, and that's the orthopedist. So the vast majority, 2/3 of these people don't have any of those problems. Well, there's nobody that can beat the chiropractor out, especially soft tissue spinal problems. They can't compete. An orthopedist can't compete against a chiropractor, or can't compete against, a neurosurgeon can't compete, see? So that niche is unbelievable. It's the largest niche, and there's no competition with authoritative medical providers. Very important. So 2% are in automobile accidents, 87% have soft tissue injury. So it's a really, here's the other key too. It's a forced market. Attorneys have to have medical reports. They have to have medical documentation, medical treatment. Okay? Well, they can't get that with those 2/3 cases. Those soft tissue injury cases, they can't get them. When they go to the doctor, you know, the emergency room or GP, they say, well, we can't see anything wrong. Here's the medication, and that's it. Well, the attorney doesn't have any case at all. It's essentially a worthless case. And they have stacks of these cases on their desk. I personally know this. This is why we created so many referrals. And I'll show you how that works. So, and the great news is it doesn't cost a lot of money. It does take skill. In other words, I am well trained in how to do educational sales with attorneys. So it does take a very good skill level, but it doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, we're talking about, and I'll go through exactly how it works, but we're talking about, you know, a little bit of stamps and some postcards, you know, in a meeting room, even if it's in your office, you know. So I'll cover that in just a second. So it's very inexpensive. And so it's a forced market. It's the largest market. There's no competition. It's the highest dollar per visit there is in chiropractic. And it's repeat business. See, once you sell the attorney and you actually do what you say you're going to do, in other words, you follow the checklist, you get all his referrals. That's how it works. And how many referrals do you need? Well, if the average case is $3,000, two cases a month is $6,000. So if you only had 3 attorneys referring you 2 cases a month, which is very easy, that's very easy to do. That's 3 times 6 is $18,000 a month. That's over $200,000 from only 3 attorneys. 3, 6, 9, 12 attorneys is $1 million a year with only 2 referrals per attorney. So that's how it works. Now, the personal injury we do also is there's really 2 types of personal injury. There's what's called, you know, the bad personal injury clinic. You know, there's a lot of fake stuff going on. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about treating the regular worker that gets in an auto. In other words, legitimate injuries. That's what I'm talking about. That's what my clinic was. It was regular workers. It was my patients, you know, that got in auto accidents, had pain and discomfort restrictions, etc. They weren't trying to milk a system or to fake a system. So we're not talking about that. That's not the personal injury we're talking about. We're talking about real qualified injuries here. Okay. So that's the opportunity. Let's go into the next one here, which is the big one. How does it work? Personal injury attorney sales. How does it work? Well, I'm going to share this with you. That when you have first of all, you start with what's called a target market. And let me just go into. So there's certain attorneys that we want to target, and I'll call them A, B, and C attorneys. So we'll start with the C attorneys, and as you get better and more knowledgeable, you can go to B attorneys. B attorneys are like Trial Lawyers Association. But we start with the easier ones, and then. But what has to happen is there has to be, remember, 75% of attorneys don't use chiropractors. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. The majority of attorneys do not use chiropractors, and I'll just tell you why. It's for the most part, it's the same reason that 92% of the population doesn't use chiropractors. Not that they don't have a problem, not that 92, see, attorneys don't know what chiropractors do because all the mixed messaging in chiropractic. And they can't have that. They can't have that in a court, in front of a court. You know, they can't have a chiropractor come in and say he does everything. That'll really just destroy the credibility of the chiropractor in the case. So they don't really know what chiropractors do. And then a lot of times the chiropractors they do work with, to be honest with you, they're just bad at documentation. They just don't know how to do what's called high sensitivity, high relevancy documentation and put it into a narrative report or testify if it needs to be. They don't know how to do it. So anyway, there's this huge opportunity. Repeat business, doesn't cost very much. You got no competition. That's why. Now, here's the good and bad news. You can only access it, there's three ways of accessing that market. One is called publicity, one is called advertising, and one is called educational sales. And here's the short of it. Those attorneys, those 75% of attorneys that don't use chiropractors, that have the majority soft tissue in your cases, they don't use chiropractors because they don't know what we do. So, and there's no perceived need. So publicity works if there's a perceived need. Well, they don't have a perceived need. That's also why advertising doesn't work. You can't do advertising solely with personal injury attorneys that expect to get referrals. There's no perceived need. An example that I give, it's kind of like if you were hungry and you wanted steak. You'll drive down the road, you'll look for a steak restaurant. Well, guess how many seafood restaurants you'll pass? You'll pass all of them because you want steak, see? So there's no perceived need. That's the big problem. Okay. Now, when it comes to actually getting the business, this is what I do. This is what the educational sales does. Is we have to take that attorney and we have to shift his consciousness level from a state of unconscious incompetence, in other words, when he doesn't know what he doesn't know, to conscious incompetence. Get him to see now what he doesn't know, not just that though, but now we have to look into the motivation, because the motivation that we want to use is what's called pain-based motivation, because that's the highest motivation there is loss. So we need to shift their mental consciousness state. This is what educational sales does, by the way. This is why advertising doesn't work and publicity does not work, because it doesn't establish need. Educational sales is the only type of marketing that establishes need. So the formula is, first you have to establish need. So we get a specific target market, and I'll go into the marketing here and the sequence and how it happens. But we'll essentially market to them, all we're trying to do initially with the marketing is stir their awareness, interest, and desire. That's it. We're not asking for referrals. We just want them to kind of peek their head up and go, what is that? What's that about? We want to get their interest enough to get them to come to the presentation, either a live stream, in a convention, in your office, whatever, okay? We just want them to get to the presentation. The presentation is an educational sales presentation. Now, here's what happens. I have to take that attorney through 3 phases to establish need. I've got to get him through the admit phase, consequence phase, and the personalization phase. That's what I have to do with the marketing. That does take skill. That's educational sales. Now, in the consequences phase, I have to cover 3 topics. One is to get him to show him how we can help increase his income, but that's the weakest that there is. Secondly is the logic, how we're going to do it. See, if you tell somebody there's pie in the sky, but you don't show them how it's done, you're not getting the business. And then the greatest motivator of all for the attorney is the money they're losing. We show them how much money they're losing that they don't even know they're losing. So it's a combination of pleasure motivation, logic motivation, fear of loss motivation. It's all 3 of it, okay? That's how this works. Well, this is what the presentation does. This is what I do. This is how, when I talk to those 110 attorneys, We signed up 98% of them, and I'd never met them before in my life. That presentation was the first time I'd met any of them. But this is how it works. So this is how educational sales work. So if you don't know, and most chiropractors don't know how to take an attorney from a state of unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence and establish the need. They don't know how to do it. And advertising won't do it, neither will publicity. That's what I do with the educational sales, the live presentations. Now, that's establishes the need. Well, the other part of the equation, there's the equation of getting the referrals. Well, that's the first part. The second part is to minimize the obstacles. There's about 6 obstacles that attorneys have with chiropractors. Now remember, the obstacles don't matter. It doesn't matter if you just address obstacles and there's no need. It doesn't matter. They're not going to act. Just like you would. If there was an obstacle and it was eliminated, but there was no need, you go, well, fine, and you go on your way. Well, that's what they do. So it's a combination, really, of 3 things. The most important one is establishing need by shifting their consciousness from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence with pleasure, logic, fear. Pleasure taking them to where they want, which is to highball offers, policy limit awards. Logic is the exact steps of how we're going to do it from the documentation standpoint. Fear is showing them how much money they're losing because it's not getting done with their present documentation. And it's the combination that's what establishes need and awareness. Okay, once that happens, now we have to minimize their obstacles. There's about 6. As an example, one obstacle is, that they shouldn't refer. It shouldn't be on the paperwork that they referred an attorney to, that patient to the chiropractor. See, that's a fake obstacle. It's not real. So we handle that. Well, there's about 6 of them. And then there are what are called service factors. Well, once there's a need and there's no obstacle, the very next thing that goes on in the attorney's mind is, well, this is what I want. There's about 8 service factors. So there's 6 obstacles, 8 service factors. So if they do refer, remember, if there's no need, they don't plan on referring. If you don't eliminate the obstacles, they're not going to refer. But once there is a need and there's no obstacles, now there's 8 questions that have to be answered. Questions like, can you help with transportation? Can you get them in your office immediately? There's 8 what are called service factors. Now, none of those matter if you don't know how to establish need. And that's, by the way, the reason I'm pointing that out is these are common mistakes doctors make. The 2 common mistakes if they actually try to do personal injury attorney presentations, number 1 is they base their motivation on pleasure, saying something about how they can help increase their injury award. That's really weak. They don't go into the logic part, and there's no pain motivation, which is the highest motivation. And then they don't handle the obstacles, and they think it's the service factors that actually is going to get the business, and it's not. It's in this order. Target market first, establish the need, admit consequences, personalization, pleasure, logic, fear, minimize the 6 obstacles, deliver the 8 service factors. That's the exact formula of how I created $20 million that year after selling 110 attorneys. That's exactly what I did. And then the referrals start immediately. What happens? As soon as I finish that presentation, the very next question, they have 2 questions when I'm done. 1, what can you do now? I've got a case now that's already been treated, but it hasn't settled yet. And I can see how I'm in trouble. Based on everything you just told me, I can see how I'm in trouble with that case. What can you do to help me with that case? That's where the business starts immediately. We help that case immediately. The second question they ask is, where are you at? In other words, are you in the area where their patients are, where their clients are? Because they need to be able to get to you. So that's why it's so important also to make sure you're dealing with attorneys that have clients that are in your backyard, your geographic radius of draw, okay? But that's exactly how all this, that's what educational sales does, okay? So you go, okay, how does this work? How does it work? Well, I said number 1, We teach you the difference between good and below average attorneys. We say, okay, there's what are called A, B, and C attorneys. So we're going to start with C attorneys that are easier to do presentations with and sell. And then when you get a little better, we move into what are called the B attorneys. Those are the trial lawyers attorneys, and that's really where there's a lot of business. The trial lawyers association attorneys. Okay, so that's how we do the target. Now we'll get the list. We'll have the list of attorneys. Now we will start with publicity and advertising, but remember, we're not trying to get any referrals from that at all, because it won't work. But we do use it to increase name recognition and awareness and interest. So we'll do a marketing campaign. Essentially, it's like sending out 3 postcards, once a week, 3 postcards. It's kind of that simple. But it has very specific information on it that stirs the awareness. And then we will invite them, and we'll also include a little video. The video adds more information. So the first postcard, second postcard, third, that kind of starts to catch their eye. It has information on it that's what's called primary and secondary pain and pleasure information. In other words, it's the first and second thing of the highest motivators for the attorney. That's what that has. We already know what that is. Okay, so that starts to grab their attention. Then we'll give them a video, either via link or USB drive, that'll talk deeper into what they just saw from those postcards. So it goes into more information, stirs up the awareness and interest more. Now they want a meeting. They want to know how this works. See, they're not going to refer, they're just interested and want to know how it works. See, so where you're at in the sales process. So that's what happens next. Now we do the presentation. The presentation does exactly what I just said. It takes them through admit, consequences, and personalization phase. That's what establishes need, gets them to see how we create policy limit awards, the logic behind it. In other words, reality, how it actually works, how cases actually get big or small based on the doctor's documentation. And then the single most important is to show them how we're going to stop them from losing money. Now remember, they got a stack of these cases they don't know what to do with because they don't have a disc injury, mild concussion, or fracture. So they're stuck. This is just such an unbelievable wide open market. This is why, so many reasons why we do so well with this. Okay, so we establish the need, we shift the consciousness in the presentation. So they come in with some interest and desire to know what this is about, and then they go through the presentation. It goes through admit, consequences, and personalization. It shifts their attitude from conscious incompetence to, or excuse me, unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And only educational sales can do that. Advertising can't. Publicity can't. It's a very specific formula. Then that's what establishes need, admit, consequences, personalization, pleasure, logic, fear. Now I got to go to the second and third part of the equation. Now I have to minimize the 6 obstacles. And now I have to go into the 8 service factors saying, yes, we'll do this, 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 this. This is exactly what you want. It's need, obstacles, service factors. Takes you to the first referral. We get 2 referrals on the spot at that presentation immediately. Now, well, I told you the ones we get first will be the ones that have already been treated, but now they're stuck. But that's where we have to start with the referrals. In other words, we got to show the attorney that we actually know what we're talking about. So I have a checklist of documentation. You learn the checklist. So we do the live presentation. You step in for 2 evaluations. In other words, essentially 2 referrals. They're what are called financial driver evaluations. Well, that's the 2 referrals that are starting immediately. You go in with the checklist, show them. Now you're going to go in and reinforce everything I just sold them on. You go over the checklist with the case that they have to show them what they do and do not have with that case. Then you take that patient, you have them refer that case to you for you to document all the things that were not documented. And we teach you exactly how to do that. But all you got to do is follow the checklist. Then we take that documentation and we put it into a narrative report. Now that narrative report is real important. I have a 12-step narrative report. Very important. And the reason it's important because it essentially takes the case where all they have to do with that narrative report is submit it for their injury ward. It has all the details, all the medicals, all the details, and it's how it's all connected, how the whole case is connected. See, attorneys don't know the medical. They know the legal, just like chiropractors, somewhat know the medical, but they don't know the legal. But we take all the medical and we connect all the dots for them and make the case for them. All you've got to do, once again, is follow my 12-step checklist when you put together that patient's information into a narrative report. So you do that for the first one. That started the referral. Now he's got a lot of confidence in you. He immediately gives you the second one because he doesn't want to deal with what he was used to dealing with. In other words, he knows too much now to go backwards. That's what he knows. He can't do it because it's hurting his cases too much. There's no way he can go back to what we showed him, all the things that he was missing with the documentation using his past doctors. There's no way he can go back. So you get the second referral checklist, you do the same thing, and all we're doing is solidifying the relationship. That's all we're doing. Typically, right about now, after you do the first one, most of these attorneys ask our clients, the clients that do this, the Car Injury Doctor Network doctors, they now ask them to be the expert witnesses for their cases. Well, here's why. They know how to put the case together and explain it. That's why. Well, the person that knows how to do that is the one that gets the referrals. So typically right about now, when you do the second one, you kind of have all their trust now. That's pretty much where you're at. From literally that point forward, you get their new referrals too. So not only the ones who have already been treated but haven't settled yet, because there's not as much in it for you at that point. Right now, all we're doing, but that's where it has to start, because you got to solve their immediate problem. That's their immediate problem after this presentation. You solve it just by following that checklist. Go to the second one. By that time, he now sees you as the authority and you know what you're doing. Now you go through the second one, and from that point forward, you not only are his expert witness, now you get all his cases when they come in to start with, because he doesn't want to go backwards. He doesn't want to miss all these things that we've covered and be stuck with a lowball offer. He doesn't want to go that route. He don't want to go that route again. Okay? That's what happens. And then we keep in touch with them. So that's the live sales presentation. So that's one. We do that 3 times a year, every 3 months. Slightly different topic, but in topics that are important and relevant to the personal injury attorneys. Number 2, now there has to be follow-up. We can't just sell an attorney and walk away and never talk to them again. That would not be smart. So we're constantly following up. Well, one of the ways we follow up is we do what's called a live video newsletter. So every week, I do a live video newsletter for only 20 minutes. I cover one topic in personal injury, why it's a problem. I cover one of their problems they typically have and why it's a problem. And then I tell them, I cover how we solve it. That is called the video newsletter. Now, I do that live. That's live streamed. And they can ask questions to me live. Now, if they miss it live, they get the recording the very next day. In other words, they're being reminded every week why they need you. They're being reinforced every week why they need you. That's the second marketing. The third marketing with the Car Injury Doctor Network is this is an automated system. We actually put it on everything I just told you is recorded. We put it on your website. We market your website with direct mail to the attorneys. They literally can go in and sign up and sign in to get the free information. Just like an opt-in. I'm sure you've been to a website where you've given your name and email and they give you Free information, well, same thing. So we do direct mail to the attorneys where they can go to your site, sign in, and it's all automated. They get the sales presentation first, they get the obstacles second, they get the service factors third, and then every week they're reminded why they need you live. And if they miss the live, they get the recording every week. Those are the 3 marketing systems. That's exactly how we've increased doctors over $1 million over 1 year, $250,000. Remember, it only takes 3 attorneys, referring only 2 cases a month to increase your business over $250,000 a year. That's exactly how it works. So it's the car engine. Now, one of the other things that it includes is obviously I have to teach it. You have to know how to document everything that's on that checklist. So I teach you, how do I teach it? I teach it, there's video recordings, and then there's live webinars. I teach it via live webinars, and I do live seminars, whether it's streaming or in person, regularly covering, to make sure it's real clear that you know how to document everything on the checklist, that you know how to do the narrative report. But that's all you got to do. All you got to do is get your list together. I tell you how to do that. We send out the mailing. I give you the mailing and what's on it. You send it to your list. We do that 3 times. We'd like to show up and give them a video. The video helps support the mailing and it expands on it. That takes them to the presentation, live presentation, preferably live. I go over with you exactly how to put that together. So we will either in your office or a restaurant or in a hotel room, we'll serve them dinner. We'll add, we'll have 3 hours of continuing legal education, and then I'm beamed in live. So you literally just turn on the internet, and I'm live doing the sales presentation, and you are the moderator in the room. You're just making sure they're going through all the topics as I go through them, and then at the end, you're just making sure you book everybody for your 2 referrals at the end of the presentation. All you've got to do is help organize the mailing, get your meeting together. I do the sales presentation, either live or automated. I do all the follow-up. I also give you the automated version. You have to treat the patient, document it accordingly to the checklist that I give you, learn the documentation checklist, learn the 12-step narrative report, just follow it. It's a template. All you got to do is just follow it. It's like paint by numbers. It's real easy. And there you have it. They're sold, you get the referrals, and you get the follow-up. As long as you deliver and you lay it out like we said we're going to lay it out, you continually to get the business, and they're constantly reminded why they need you. Constantly. At least once a week. And then 3 months later, we do another presentation. And then we help to seal that relationship even more. And then we use that meeting to bring in more attorneys. And that's how, if you only picked up 2 or 3 attorneys in one presentation, that's 4 presentations a year, every 3 months, 2, 4, 6, 8. If you only got 2 referrals per attorney, 2 times 8 is 16, and your average case is $3,000, there's $500,000 right there. Pretty fast and quick. And it happens a lot faster than what you believe. This is exactly how, this is one of the very core systems I use to open 77 offices in 20 states. And this is exactly how I sold 110 attorneys. 98% of them signed up to refer their cases. See, we took them from a state of unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, and there was no way they were going back. That's how it works, okay? That's a huge difference between advertising, publicity, and educational sales. There's tremendous business in educational sales, and those are the formulas. Obviously, we know the specifics. So that's how it works. You go, okay, well, what does it cost? It costs on average 1 PI case a year. That's what I charge. So essentially, not one PI case a month, one PI case a year. So if I get you one PI case over a whole year with everything I just told you, 4 presentations, 3 hours live, weekly live presentations, what's the likelihood I'm not going to be able to get you one? Well, that's not real. So one, you'll break even. Everything above one PI case for that year, everything above it's 100% profit. That's exactly how it works. So it is limited to your geographic area. In other words, whatever the radius of draw is of my clients, I can't have 2 clients within that radius of draw because I have to protect the attorney. Not the attorney, but I got to protect my clients to make sure he gets the business in that geographic radius of draw. And we determine that. It could be the zip code, it could not be. It just depends. I mean, you can have zip codes, with 100,000 people or more where there's definitely way more need than one chiropractor. And you can have rural areas. I mean, as an example, in my office when I practiced in a town of 3,000. It was a bedroom community. 2% of the patients in my community were in auto accidents, but I got them. So this is exactly how it works. It's called the Car Injury Doctors Network. Car Injury Doctors Network. And this is how I sell the attorneys for you. I create the referrals. You just have to get your list together. You've got to, I'll show you how to do that. And then you've got to learn the documentation checklist. But it's paint by numbers. You just follow the checklist. Just make sure you follow the checklist. That's it. Same with the narrative report. Here's the checklist for the narrative report. Just follow the checklist. That's it. It's paint by numbers. I sell them. I do the weekly follow-up, and it's on automated direct also. It's every quarter with the big presentation. That's 3 hours in the evening. And then weekly, it's only 20-minute snippets. It's constant sales and reinforcement to support your personal injury practice. But that's how we get you up and going fast. So if you're interested, give me a call. Again, I'm Dr. Paul. You can reach me at 813-480-1693. And my website is chiropracticpersonalinjurymarketing.com, chiropracticpersonalinjurymarketing.com. But this is very unique in that this marketing system alone is what creates the most business because most of the PI cases are with the attorneys. Over 80% are with the attorneys, not on Facebook pay-per-click or all the, that's little stuff. You want to significantly increase your business, it's the attorneys, and it's a forced market. They have to send them somewhere. It might as well be you. And remember, I've been in a lot of these guys' offices. They are not using, the majority of them do not even use chiropractors. They got a stack of cases. They don't know what to do with. They get lowball offers. They don't know, they can't handle them because they don't have the documentation to help it. And the orthopedic surgeon and the neurologist and the neurosurgeon, they can't help the soft tissue injury. They're worthless relative to the soft tissue spinal injury. The chiropractor is actually the only person and the best person. And that's the majority of the market. That's how, so it's the largest segment of the market. There's no competition and it's repeat business. And it's the largest case average. $3,000 a case. Go ahead and do the math, see how much it's going to take. 2 or 3 attorneys, you increase your business $250,000 a year, just like that. Give me a call if you want more information. 813-480-1693. That's 813-480-1693. We look forward to hearing from you.